My name is Marcus Tomalin. I'm one of the people who's helped organise this workshop. And I'll just give you a little bit of context, really, concerning the project that's organised this event and that organises various other events. And then I'll start to introduce the speakers who'll be with us today. So this is the third workshop in a series organised by a 4-year project called Giving Voice to Digital Democracies. And the subtitle of the project is The Social Impact of Artificially Intelligent Communications Technology. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a couple of slides' time. You've got the main sort of cast of characters here who are involved with this project, and I think all of us will be around today. So if you have any questions about what we do and why we do it, do please ask us. And the funding for this project comes from the International Foundation for the Humanities and Social Change, which is an international organisation that has centres, one of them in Santa Barbara, one of them in Berlin, one of them in Venice, and one of them here in Cambridge. And so this project is under that foundation's kind of umbrella, really. And so what is it in particular that we focus on? Well, we're interested in AI, but specifically we're interested in language-based AI or language-related AI. And so we tend to use this acronym AICT, that's really the intersection of AI and information and communications technology. Okay, so that's what we've got in mind. And this slide just really summarizes some of the specific technologies that fall within that broad category. So things like speech recognition, speech synthesis, machine translation, but also natural language understanding or natural language generation. All of these things that, as I say, are kind of language-based, but which are also AI systems. And I suppose the prototypical examples of these kinds of systems at the moment would be virtual personal assistants, things like Siri and Alexa and Cortana. These are things that are becoming increasingly familiar, I think, to many people in their daily lives. And these are systems that are starting to have some kind of impact on society. And the sort of various issues relating to that are hopefully some of the things that we'll have the opportunity to talk about later today. Obviously, there's no shortage of opportunities to talk about artificial intelligence. I mean, yet again, it's enjoying a period of tremendous popularity. It sort of goes through phases. In the 50s, it's really popular, and then it kind of wanes a bit, and then it comes back, and then it wanes. And at the moment, it's undergoing another period of great sort of attention. And yet, it seems to us that there are a relatively small number of topics that are discussed at length, and a vast number of AI-related topics that receive much less attention. So things like data-related issues, data protection, I mean, for understandable reasons, they receive a lot of discussion, a lot of scrutiny, and things like the introduction of GDPR last year. That obviously, again, is something that's had a big impact on how many of us handle data. And then issues such as the Cambridge Analytica scandal, that again drew everyone's attention to, what happens to our data, and companies like Facebook or whatever, if they acquire our data, what do they do with it? So those sorts of issues are prominent, they're discussed quite frequently. There's also a big emphasis on issues to do with transparency and explainability, and there are various academics who are arguing that AI systems should be more transparent or should have a higher degree of explainability. And things like the EU ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI were published a few months ago. And again, things like that really focused attention on those issues. And then there are the things that always get discussed at any kind of AI seminar or workshop or panel discussion. And it tends to be AI-assisted medical diagnosis, self-driving cars, and then, of course, killer robots. Everybody loves the killer robots. And all of these things are legitimate things to think about, and I'm in no way suggesting that these are trivial and inconsequential things. But the point I'd really like to make is that in addition to these things, there's also a vast number of other topics that rarely receive the scrutiny they deserve. And many of those other things fall into this broad category of language-related AI systems. So here are just a few newspaper headlines, just randomly selected really from the last few months, that indicate the degree of, I guess, social concern or social interest in other topics. So there's things here to do with AI systems that generate fake news automatically and concerns about how dangerous that is. Things to do with the impact of social media, and of course social media runs all sorts of kind of AI systems and processes as part of it, even though it perhaps doesn't manifest itself in an obvious way to the users. But there are concerns that social media, can have a significant impact on mental health, particularly of vulnerable people or adolescents. Online hate speech, again, is something that receives attention in the press, and there are concerns about that, and various governments at the moment are thinking about strategies for handling hate speech in more effective ways. Things like, making use of data that's recorded by, let's say, virtual personal assistants. Again, who has that data and where does it go, and how and when should it be processed? And then things like the fact that virtual personal assistants are often gendered. These might be systems that are designed to have a human-like persona, and what are the consequences of that? So none of these things are, killer robots. None of these are self-driving vehicles. None of these are AI-assisted medical diagnoses. But these are issues that are of serious contemporary concern and therefore merit serious scrutiny and consideration. And that's the kind of thing that this project is trying to direct attention towards. Obviously, that can be done in various ways. So those of us involved with the project do the usual academic things. We write journal articles, and we prepare conference papers and things like that. But we're also keen to connect with other groups. I mean, academia is all very well, but often it can be a room full of academics talking to itself, and the ideas don't necessarily get much beyond that group. So I think raising public awareness of these issues and engaging with other groups outside of academia is also important. So we've been involved in various initiatives like that over the past year or so. For instance, I chaired a panel discussion at the Royal Society in the summer this year that was focused on technology and society. I know it's kind of annoying to get these things just from a slide, but you can see the link there if you want to listen to the audio of that discussion. And it was really well attended, some excellent questions from the audience, and a really impressive panel of speakers who outlined kind of their own perspective concerning technology and specifically kind of AI stuff in relation to society. And that's the kind of event that we're keen to be involved with. We're also keen to try and engage with the specific government departments that are starting to think about perhaps forms of legislation concerning these technologies. And we've already liaised with several groups of that kind in order to make sure that in their thinking about these technologies, they have a good understanding of what the technologies are capable of, and indeed what they're not capable of. And again, that seems to be a crucial part of this. But then also issues concerning education. So at the moment, you have this slightly anomalous situation in that, for instance, students who come to Cambridge to study medical sciences have to study medical ethics. It's a compulsory part of their course, and most people would say, well, of course, it should be. Yet the students who come here to study, say, computer science or information technology aren't required to take any ethics courses of any kind, and yet arguably the systems that eventually they may be involved in developing will have as significant a social impact as those students who are here studying medicine. And that's something that's starting to change, particularly in the States. It's increasingly becoming more common for computer scientists and information technology students to have some kind of introduction to ethics. But certainly here at Cambridge, that doesn't happen at the moment. And so that's something we're keen to introduce. And so this coming year, we're starting to put in place a series of modules that will be available for those students so that they at least get some sort of introduction to these sorts of issues. And the hope is that being aware of these issues will have an impact on the kind of systems they develop in the next 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years. That's the hope anyway. Maybe we're being too optimistic, but it's worth a try. So that just gives you some context of the particular project that's organised this workshop and the sort of things we're interested in. And these are just some of the things that we hope we'll be able to achieve today. Each of the speakers today will speak for about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes max. And then there'll be as long again for a sort of Q&A session involving you all. And we're well aware that there are many people in the audience here who know as much about some of the topics being discussed today as those of us up here at the front. And so we're keen to hear your views, your perspectives, and hopefully generate some conversations involving people who wouldn't normally find themselves in the same room at the same time. So that's the idea, and hopefully that's what we'll be able to achieve. In case you're interested in other things, we've got a whole series of events for the coming academical year, and we'll be communicating information about that via our Twitter feed and other things on the CRASSH website and everything. The most immediate things that we're involved with are various events as part of the Cambridge Festival of Ideas that starts in a couple of weeks' time, really. Just as a result of the sort of complexities of planning these things, the three events that members of our team are involved with all happen to be on the same day, so you can get thoroughly sick of us in less than 24 hours if you want. So Anne Copestake, who some of you know, who's connected with the project, will be interviewing Caroline Criado Perez, who wrote the book Invisible Women, and so there'll be a discussion about that text and specifically thinking about gender bias. And then Stephanie Ullman, who's sitting somewhere, I think, at the back there, and I will be giving two talks on the 19th. One broadly on artificial intelligence and social change, and then the other one specifically on hate speech and how AI systems can be used to try and delimit the impact that hate speech can have online. So if you're interested in that, just go to the Festival of Ideas website and you can find all the details. All the information's there. I think that's all I have to say. So as I say, I hope that gives you some sort of context